Hi, and welcome to Win-Win Women. My name is Patricia Stepler, and I am your show host for Your Invisible Power. So today my topic is how to develop your inside power. You see, your inside power is, of course, the name of my show, but it's also a topic that we're going to cover today, because once you understand how to develop your inside power, you can start to achieve one thing after another. So I want to start today with a quote by Robert Collier saying, "All power is from within and therefore under our control." Isn't that wonderful? Everything starts from within, it's under our control. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we have to start living from our inside out instead of allowing the outside world to dictate to us what we're going to do and how we think about ourselves. We have to think from the inside. So everything's what we call an inside job, right? So I want you to realize that we all have infinite power inside of us. All the power we want, we already have. We just have to learn how to tap into it. And we do that through our 6 intellectual faculties. The most important one being imagination. Imagination is crucial if you're going to change your life, because you first have to imagine what kind of life you want. So we have to realize that the laws of this universe work for everyone exactly the same. And when John F. Kennedy was asking von Braun how we would get to the moon, he said that, everything in this universe is precise. And so therefore there had to be a mind or something bigger beyond us that set up all the rules, and that you could time the landing to the moon with a precision of a second. Now, if you can do that time after time, we know that the laws have to be in place. And see, there's similar laws that not only work for science, but also work for human beings. And the power is in your mind in connecting to that source energy or higher power. You have to realize that everything that comes into your life, you've attracted. Now, some of you might say, well, I didn't attract this, that, or the other thing. Let me explain to you how that happens, because I used to think the same thing. Why would you attract something bad into your life? That makes no sense. But this is what happens. You see, we are vibrating at a very high rate of speed. Everything around you is moving. We live in this ocean of motion, and everything's vibrating and everything's moving. And you see, not only is everything moving, but thought also has a frequency and also has energy. Listen to something I was just reading this morning. It says here, you are the most powerful transmission tower in the universe. In simple terms, all energy vibrates at a frequency. Being energy, you also vibrate at a frequency. And what determines your frequency at any time is whatever you are thinking and feeling. All the things you want are made of energy, and they are vibrating too. Everything is energy. And that's from the book, The Secret by Rhonda Burns. So we are vibrating. Everything is vibrating. Thought is energy. Thought is vibrating. Napoleon Hill, in his book, Think and Grow Rich, the very first sentence, he says, thoughts are things. In fact, Bob Proctor wrote a book called Thoughts Are Things. You see, a thought is energy. And so whatever energy that thought has, if you're thinking of it, you're in harmony or vibrating with that energy. So even when you're thinking of something you do not want to come into your life, the fact that you're thinking of that puts you on that same frequency as that thought. And whatever you are in harmony with, or whatever you're thinking, or whatever the energy or vibration that you're on, you are attracting other things that are on that same vibration. And this is why when bad things are happening, the more we give energy to it, the more we think about it, the more it causes. I remember when I was teaching school, and in the fall of the year, we would always talk about bullying, and we'd make sure that children and parents knew that if their child or that they were being bullied, that they could contact the school. And I'll never forget one time, this is before I understood any of this, and one of the administrators came to me and we were talking about it, and he said, every year when we start talking about bullying, and of course if it's in the news, because the newscasters are talking about it, he says we get so many more phone calls and parents complaining about their child being bullied. Well, that's because we were giving attention to it. Not only were schools giving attention to it, kids were thinking about it, parents were notified, they heard it through the media, and the more the energy was there towards bullying, the more apparent bullying there was. And he says, I can't wait till we're done talking about it. And sure enough, then it would drop off. You see, we were giving energy to it. So when bad things happen in the world, the more energy the media and we give to it, the more we're actually encouraging to continue to happen, because we're in vibration with it. And the more we tend to draw into our lives and the lives of others. So what we really need to start thinking about is peace, calm, healthy, wealthy, and think of the things we do want, not the things we do not want. Because when we think of things we do not want, we tend to bring them into our lives. So this is a very orderly universe, which is why you can time the precision landing on the moon, because everything has an order. It seems like God's universe is order. It's the first thing. Heaven's calls for order. So when we understand that, we also will understand how we attract into our lives the things we're thinking about. And one thing that all philosophers have agreed on, they've disagreed on most everything that's been said, but one thing they tend to agree on is that we become what we think about. So what are you thinking about? Because what you think about, you will become. And I can see this happening in my own life, as well as in lives of others. And for those of you who know my son's story, that's what he did. He saturated his mind with the thought of what he wanted to do. And if you saturate your mind with the thought of what you want to do, you will become that, because it works the same for everybody. So it has to work for you too. So when we talk about the 95 and the 5%, remember a couple of years ago, there was all this, talk about the 5%ers, and the other 95. Well, here's the thing. The 5% of people start to understand this information. There's been Harvard studies. There was one that was about, people who set goals, and they found 5% of people set goals. And those 5% of people, they went through how much more successful they were than anybody else, because they actually wrote the goals down. So, understanding that there's 5% of the population will actually step aside and do something different. Most people follow along with the masses and they do what everybody else is doing. But if you really want to be successful, step away from what everybody else is doing and follow the 5%. Because the 5% understands something that others do not. And they think thoughts of abundance and of what they do want. And they think thoughts of abundance, health, wealth, relationships. And they don't allow, here's the key, don't allow contradictory thoughts to come into your mind. Contradictory thoughts cause ambivalence. So you have do it, don't do it. Say it, don't say it. They're contradictory thoughts. Make a decision of what it is you want and make a decision that you're going after it, and then focus on the good that you want. And anytime a contradictory thought to what you want comes in your mind, get rid of it. It's one of the first things you need to do. You see, the universal laws respond to your thoughts. Now, one of my very favorite books is The Science of Getting Rich. And in The Science of Getting Rich, and this is by Wallace D. Wallace, and this was written way back in the early part of the 1900s, but it is just such a powerful book. But Wallace D. Waddles, and he kind of tells a story of people who started to think about what they wanted and then to accomplish it. And so he comes up with this hypothesis in his story. And he says, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. Now just think of that for a minute. So there's this thinking stuff, and it's all over the place. It's connected. It's connected from one person to the next. It's connected. It's got everything there is in this space, okay? A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. So a thought in the substance produces what is imaged by the thought. So you think a thought and you imagine it. He goes on to say, man can form things in his thought, and by impressing his thought upon formless substance can cause the thing he thinks about to be created. Now, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about inventions and inventors. Well, how does an inventor invent something new? It starts with a thought. They first have to think a thought, and they think that in their conscious mind. And it's probably something they see as a need. Maybe it started out as a need. They see something that maybe could be made easier. And so they think about it, and they see the need, and they come up with an idea. And then they start thinking about it, and they think about it. And the more they think about it, because they become so absorbed with solving this issue, that they may try to create a few things that come up in their mind, and maybe they can't quite get it right. And so they continue to think. You know, they say Thomas Edison, when he was inventing something and it wasn't quite going right, that he would take a little cat nap, and he'd just sit quietly in a chair and close his eyes and think about the solution he was trying to get to, and think about maybe the parts that he has invented. And he would hold a stone in his hand. And as what often would happen is that he would drift off to sleep, and pretty soon the stone would fall out of his hand and drop down, and that would wake him up. And generally, he had a new idea at that point. You see, what he was doing, he had his imagination working. And you see, the mind never sleeps. Even though he closed his eyes and maybe he fell asleep, the mind never sleeps. And it was coming up with a solution because that's what he told his mind to do. You see, this is what we need to do. It's not difficult. Doing it, however, and being consistent and not allowing the doubt to come in, that's where it becomes difficult. So think a thought, and then the laws will bring it into things. That's how thoughts become things. You think a thought, and it becomes something. So you not only become what you think about most, you attract what you think about most. And that's how the law of attraction works. What you think about must happen. Now, some people say, well, I've been thinking about such and such, and it didn't happen. What were your thoughts? I would go back to exactly what were your thoughts? Because so often we think that we are thinking about something, but then we allow it to turn negative. And you see, when you allow it to turn negative, then you're attracting different vibration. Let me give you an easy example of this. So let's say that what you really want is to have more money in your bank account. And what you're thinking about is paying off all those bills. So you want more money to pay off the bills, But what you're concentrating on is paying off the bills and maybe even getting out of debt. Maybe even say that I want to earn money to get out of debt. Only the universe just hears debt. You want debt. And so it keeps giving you more things to have to pay for. And the way you can tell this is if you're thinking debt and you're getting very close, let's say maybe you have a car payment, you're getting super close to the last car payment. All of a sudden, let's say your heat pump or your furnace goes bad, and now you have thousands of dollars more that you owe. And see, if you're thinking of debt, you're just going to keep attracting more debt. So when you get close to getting out of debt, it boomerangs and you start attracting more debt. So what you have to do is think of abundance. Think about having plenty of money, being grateful for paying those bills. When the bill comes in, I am so happy that I have the ability to take care of this bill. And I'm so happy and grateful that I, am able to have heat in my home. You see, when you're grateful, it changes your whole vibration. And you start to attract more of what you want. So decide what it is you want so that you attract the right things. So your life right now is a reflection of your past thoughts. So everything that you have is a reflection of your past thoughts. Now, I read when we started a quote by Robert Collier. Here's another one by Robert Collier. He says, 99% of who you are is invisible and untouchable. It's invisible and untouchable. 99% of who you are. You see, we are spirit. We are spirit living in a body with an intellect. So we're on 3 simultaneous planes. We are a body, we have an intellect, and we are spirit. Now, Michael Beckwith says this, scripturally, we could say that we are the image and the likeness of God. We could say we are another way that the universe is becoming conscious of itself. And we could say that we are the infinite field of unfolding possibility. All of this would be true. All of it would be true. You see, we are spirit. 99% of who you are is invisible and untouchable. That's powerful, isn't it? It's very powerful. So, thoughts become things. What you think about is what you become. What you think about is what you attract to yourself. Thoughts have a frequency and it's completely measurable. You have to be in harmony with that frequency to attract what you want. So let's say you want to have a more abundant life, and maybe an abundant life is $100,000 a year. So you have to start seeing yourself having $100,000 and doing the things that you would do to earn that $100,000. So what does that mean? Does that mean a different job? Does that mean a different position in your company, that somebody who earns 100,000? So start looking, who earns $100,000 in your company? Where do you have to go? Who do you have to become? What position do you have to hold? And then start thinking about having that position and being on that frequency. And when you do that, and when you get on that frequency, it has to happen. Now, it won't happen overnight. It might take a month. It might take a year. It might be with a different company. So you have to also be open to the possibilities that the thing you want is not in a place where you want. It might mean switching to a different company. It might mean moving to a different city. Because you see, the universal mind's connected to everything. Remember that space, that substance, that thinking substance? It's connected to everything, every place. So we don't always know the right answer. All we have to do is know what we want. How it will happen, we cannot necessarily predict. That doesn't mean we just sit around waiting. You have to do something. You have to make some type of move. Because you see, if you just think about it and you never put any action behind it, you're not showing the universe that you really want it. You see, you have to start making some moves. But as you make those moves towards the goal that you desire, be aware that when a roadblock gets put in your way or some discouragement, maybe you applied for that job in your company that's that level that would be $100,000 and you didn't get the job. And so some people would become very discouraged. And then they forget about, well, it wasn't going to work. None of this works. This is, doesn't happen. But what they do not realize is that position, that $100,000 position, is going to come from someplace else. And so, I've heard the saying, when a door is closed, a window opens. So you have to be willing for that window to open and be willing to make that kind of a move. So frequencies are connected to the frequency above and below. It's just a complete connection. And the frequency of energy that you want is sent into the universe, and then it comes back to you. So you're like a sending station and a receiving station. You send out what it is that you want, and then you receive back to you that energy, kind of like a boomerang. And thoughts create a frequency, and they attract like things that are on that same frequency. And that's how it works. So to change your life, you have to channel the frequency by changing your thought. So just like on a TV station, you're watching one show, but you want to go to another show. You have to change the channel. You have to get on a different frequency because each TV, station is on a frequency. So to go from ABC to CBS, you have to change frequencies on your TV. That's what you have to do with your thoughts. Where you are today is one frequency, but where you want to go is a different frequency. So you must change your own internal channel to get onto that frequency. See, most people think about what they don't want, and then they wonder why it keeps coming to them. And you see this a lot with people when they think about money. I see this more, money and health, I'll say. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, and I always ask, is it okay if I give you some advice? Because so often what I'll hear them say is things like, I struggle to do this, or, I'm not feeling good, and I don't, this is wrong with me and that's wrong with me. The more you talk about it, the more it happens to you. So just to tell you a funny story. This is about myself. A few years ago, my granddaughter was living with us while my daughter was finishing medical school. And so in the summer, then she went to see her dad. My daughter and my former son-in-law were divorced. And so she would go in the summer to spend the summer with dad. So after she left that year, I was just so tired. And every afternoon, sometime after lunch, I would just get so exhausted, and I just kind of lie down just for a few minutes. And, like an hour and a half later, I finally woke up. And I thought I was just getting older, or that, my granddaughter had just exhausted me so much that I just couldn't keep up. But I didn't really dwell on it. I just thought, that's just the way it is. So I was going to a conference that summer, and I knew it was going to be 3 very long days of training. And I thought, my goodness, how am I ever going to stay awake? But I thought, I've got to figure out a way to stay awake. So I just kind of said, I'll be fine. It will keep me engaged. I'll be engaged in the training. And I was. And I had no trouble staying awake. But as soon as I got back home, same thing, lunchtime, fall off to sleep. So about that time, this is like the middle of July, I had a doctor's appointment and my doctor had run some blood work on me. And I honestly didn't know what all blood work she had done. But when I went into the office, she said, "So how are you feeling?" And I said, "I feel great," because that was kind of me. I feel great. And she looked at me and she goes, "Really?" And, when a doctor says it to you, kind of like, uh-oh, what's wrong with me? So what she told me was that my B12 levels were so low. And she said, "You've got to take B12." And she started telling me a few of the side effects of having a low B12 level. And I said, "Oh, I do feel that well. Yeah, that does happen to me." But I'd kind of just put it off as it's just the way it is. I feel great. And then the more I started reading about effects of low B12, I started to like check off almost every single box that was there. So I started taking B12 and these symptoms all started to go away. And so I just quit worrying about it. And, now when I feel like some of the symptoms are coming on, I just bump up the B12, and when I feel like I've got way too much energy, I just bump down the B12. And, that's just a simple thing, but, you are who you think about. And so my mantra to her was, I feel great. But I really didn't, but I didn't let it consume my mind. Learned about the effects, learned how to manage it. Now I know not everything is as simple as, taking some B12 tablets when you're got a low B12 level, but you can't let it consume you. You have to live your life and you have to go on. And you have to think about what it is that you want, not what it is that you don't want. Because you see, the more you dwell on some bad health thing that you have, the more you attract that into your life. I know when a number of years ago, my dad had colon cancer and they used radiation to shrink the tumor. But he also used positive thinking and he used visualization, that tumor shrinking. And sure enough, it shrunk so much. Now, it didn't help him in the end because he still had to have the surgery that he was hoping to prevent. However, he thought about it and he thought about how good he felt and how that tumor was shrinking. And you hear people do this all the time. Does it work for everybody? Well, obviously not. But the mind is very powerful. And it's amazing the things you can control when you use your mind. So start thinking about what you do want. And the law of attraction, which is part of the law of vibration. And that law will bring things into your life because that's just the way the nature's laws work. So what you focus on, you call into existence in your life. And let's just look at this quote one more time by Robert Collier. All power is from within and therefore under our control. So, I encourage you to reach out to me so that we can book a conversation and so that maybe I can say to you, do you mind if I give you a suggestion? Because I really want to help you to get on the road of being in the right vibration and focusing on the good that you want in your life instead of focusing on those things that you do not want in your life, so that you can truly become the person that you want to be and create the life that you want, because we do create our own reality. This is Patricia Stepler, and this is Your Inside Power, where I want you to control your inside powers so you can accomplish exactly what you want.